Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining us. So I am joined today by Natalie Fee. This is the first of a section of climate change talks that we wanted to pull together as part of Western Town Council's commitment to the climate emergency. So we thought that the best way to do this was to get some brilliant minds, of which Natalie is a superb mind, get some brilliant minds in to be able to help us out really, a bit of advice, a little bit of know-how about how we can make changes in our own lives that is going to affect the greater whole and also within our town and within our council, that ultimately will give us the opportunity to hopefully change the world. So Natalie is just incredible. I think I knew Natalie before she started City to Sea, and I have seen this powerhouse of a woman just take off. Just so from winning awards for City to Sea, she got a doctorate off the back of it. She even got invited to the royal wedding. Like, yeah, I know. I mean, she had to be outside. They wouldn't let her in. But, you know, so all of this experience that you have brought to the table, and a city, being Bristol, where Nat currently lives, to the sea, which is Weston-super-Mare, where we are. So it impacts us enormously. Even if we're not an albatross, it still impacts enormously in the environment that we've got in Weston-super-Mare. And something that we have been noticing just recently is the amount of litter that is being left behind on our beaches, which is something that is really heartbreaking to see. So so I'm sure that Natalie's going to talk about, well, just so much stuff. I'm so excited. So I'm just going to literally hand over so Natalie can empty that brain of wisdom that she's got, and let's see what ideas she's got.
Thank you so much, Becky. That was a completely awesome introduction. I definitely feel like I'm more heart than brain. They didn't give me my doctorate because I was in any way clever. So, but thank you. And it's really lovely to be here, and it's really heartening as well that Western Council are taking these steps and you know, getting things out there like this, because the time is very much now in terms of that. So yeah, so welcome to everyone that's watching, Becky's done an amazing job of introducing me. So I'll just start by talking about City to Sea and some of our campaigns, and then I'll talk more about my book, How to Save the World for Free, and share some tips with you on things that we can do in our everyday life beyond plastic. I mean, plastic is very topical at the moment because it's Plastic Free July. And so we can talk specifically around tips around living with less plastic, or if there I think Becky's got some questions that we can answer later on as well. So that's just the flow. We'll talk about City to Sea, talk about my book, and then I'll come back to you, Becky. So we're actually celebrating our 5th year of City to Sea this year. So back in 2014, I was working for a local TV company, for Made in Bristol TV, and living in Bristol, and I became aware of the problem of plastic pollution. Like so many people, I saw those images of the Albatross Chicks in the Midway Islands, thousands of miles away from any major landmass. A third of them dying in their nests with their bellies full of plastic because their parents were mistaking plastic for fish, swooping down, picking it up, and then coming back and feeding them with that plastic. Now, that I saw a clip by an artist called Chris Jordan telling that story in a very, very powerful and moving way, and that was really for me the catalyst for my own personal journey to do something about plastic pollution. So I saw this gruesome yet beautifully put together clip on Facebook. I think it was only like a minute and a half. And that was the catalyzing moment for me when I knew that I had to do something about this problem of plastic pollution. The funny thing is, at the time, I was completely terrified of the sea. I am the least likely ocean ambassador you will ever meet, because I actually had a phobia of the sea. And so the fact that I was drawn in to kind of serve the ocean in a way was quite extraordinary. And I definitely blame the albatross, because it was, for me, seeing those images of those beautiful, majestic creatures, and very cute when they are chicks, suffering to such a degree with plastic that I recognized as things that I was using in my everyday life. So that for me was like, okay, everything kind of turned on its head at that point, and I knew in my bones that I needed to do something about plastic pollution. So I set off on my journey, deciding to do a pop video, which of course is where you begin, isn't it, when you want to change the world. I'd forgotten to, well, I'd kind of, forgotten that ideally, if you want to change the world through a pop song, it's probably good if you're like already Beyonce or Coldplay or, you know, someone very, very famous. But it was a good place to start. I did a crowdfunding campaign, got my music video out there about plastic pollution. It's called Burden, if you want to look it up. Becky might even put the link into it. And it was my response. It was like, what can I do now to this problem? And I honestly didn't know where to begin. And so I thought, well, you know, occasionally I dabble in music. The TV company I worked for at the time wouldn't go anywhere near it. They didn't want to do environmental stuff. So I knew I had to do something myself. So an artistic response was my first response. And then from there, I went on to think, well, maybe I can do a bit more. That didn't really bring me the impact I hoped it would. So took that and started City to Sea, gathered people around me who were passionate about plastic pollution, gathered a bit of funding from different sort of corporate partners or water companies, Bristol 2015 on our year as Green Capital. And that's sort of how it began, really. I set it up as a community interest company. And in 2015, we launched our refill campaign, piloting that in summer 2015. And so it's sort of grown from there. In 2016, so refill was kind of going along in the background. I'll talk a little bit more about what that is and how people can get involved.
I think most of Weston have got the refill stickers on the shop windows. So yeah, we've certainly taken that wholeheartedly. So yeah.
It is amazing. Well, we'll talk about that now. I mean, so the volunteers in Weston have been incredible, and we now have over 350 community schemes around the UK and globally as well. So refill, for anyone that doesn't know what refill is, it's essentially a way to get access to free drinking water on the go wherever you go. And you can do that just by looking out for the stickers in the windows or the posters that say refill, and you can come in and fill your bottle up for free, or you can download the free refill app, which we developed and launched in 2016. And now 4 years later, it's kind of an all singing, all dancing affair. It's a great app, and we've had over 300,000 downloads of it now. So that's doing good. But the thing I'm most proud of about Refill, other than the sort of team at HQ powering it, is the volunteers. And they are the people that have made it happen by volunteering their time and going out and putting stickers up in cafes and talking to cafes and putting the cafes on the app. They've been absolutely amazing. So that's sort of, you know, the heart and soul of the project, really. We partnered with the water industry and people like Chili's Bottles, who donate a percentage of every Chili's refill bottle sold. And so that's how we've managed to power our campaigns and our refill campaigns. So that's been kind of going along. And then alongside that, in 2016, we did our Switch the Stick campaign, which was where we got all of the UK supermarkets to stop making cotton buds out of plastic and make them out of paper instead. And that was like a petition-based campaign that was really about the customers of supermarkets telling them they didn't want to buy plastic cotton buds anymore, putting lots of pressure on them. And within about 4 months, we managed to get all of the UK supermarkets to agree to switch the stick. We did a 38 degrees petition, and that change stopped over 400 tons of non-recyclable single-use plastic at source every year. So quite a significant shift. And we've kind of carried on with our unflushables campaign. So the thing with cotton buds is they were being flushed down the toilet. They shouldn't be flushed down the toilet, even if they're made of paper. But lots of people didn't know that, and they were doing it anyway. So we carried on from Switch the Stick to look at other things that are being flushed, and especially in Weston, you see this firsthand. You'll see the cotton buds are all over the shoreline. Fortunately now there are less of them. Figures have been going down. The Marine Conservation Society Beachwatch report has shown a drop in sewage related debris, as they call it. Basically plastic that people are flushing down the loo. So things like wet wipes, which are around 98% plastic, menstrual products, which also get flushed frequently but shouldn't be flushed, and then just random plastic things that you would really not expect to be flushed, but things like plasters and condoms, probably all the things you've seen from time to time strewn along the beach, unfortunately. So so we've done a lot of work on that as well, and generally we focus our campaigns on the top 10 items, plastic items found on beaches around the world. So plastic bottles, menstrual products, cotton buds, and more recently coffee cups. So yeah, we've had a busy time of it over the past sort of 5 years. We're now a team of about, I think we're around about 27 of us, based around the UK. And more recently, what we've been doing is sort of responding to the pandemic. Is we've seen this sort of pushback against single-use plastics, and we've seen the plastics industry starting to lobby very hard governments to revoke bans on single-use plastics. So they're kind of seeing coronavirus as an opportunity to produce a lot more plastic. So what we've been doing at City to Sea as a response to that is launching a campaign called Contactless Coffee. So if you're going out and you want to still use your reusable, but your local coffee shop, for example, is saying, no, sorry, we can't, health and safety, we have to do disposables, you can show them the contactless coffee video, and you can show them how they can refill your cup without having to touch it. So we did the Contactless Coffee campaign, launched a video as well about disposing PPE and using reusable face masks. So that's some of the things that we've been working on recently. Yeah, so I think sort of moving on from our campaigns, I mean, just to sort of, one more thing to mention through that is another one of our campaigns, which has been still thriving during lockdown, has been our Rethink Periods campaign, which is all about providing an unbiased education to school children around their periods, and how to have a less environmentally damaging period by using reusable period products or organic period products. So we've been very active in that, and we're rolling out a free schools program at the moment. And so if anyone's watching that's a teacher or that's got kids in school, there are ways that you can have free online trainings, or you can have an ambassador come to the school once we're back at school. So if anyone's interested in that, it's called Rethink Periods, and that's on our website as well. So yes, I think that is the family of City to Sea campaigns, and what I'd been feeling after the sort of 4 years of talking about plastics day in and day out. I was very aware of how plastics was related to climate breakdown, and the link between plastics being made of fossil fuels and the fact that we very much need to be keeping fossil fuels in the earth if we want to avoid irreversible ecological collapse from climate breakdown. So I also love to write, and I was missing writing. We're doing my campaign work at City to Sea, so I decided to write a book, and take people who'd come into environmentalism through plastic pollution, and see if I could take them on a journey to explore some of the other issues that are going wrong in the world, and a lot of them, you know, people are already aware of, but the book was a dive into all of those other subjects. So the book is How to Save the World for Free, and that came out last October. And so the first sort of fifth of the book is very much about the 7 things that we need to save. So I looked at some of the things. I tried to cover all of the things, sadly, that are going wrong in the world. So our oceans, our rivers and seas are oceans as well. I kind of think I've probably clumped those into the same one. Forests, biodiversity, climate, us as well as a species. So in the first section, I dived down into the 7 things we need to save and really sort of unpick what's going wrong in those areas. And then the rest of the book is very much solutions focused. So it's sort of how to save the world when you eat, when you drink, when you travel, when you play, when you vote, when you bank, when you use the bathroom. So there's 12 different chapters on all things that you can do in your daily life, but it's also anecdotal. And although the first bit, I'm not going to lie, it's fairly depressing, because I don't beat around the bush and I do tell it how it is, but then I feel like I take you by the hand and we then, you know, go and have a look at our life and look at all the different things that we can do. So we thought it would be helpful if I shared some tips from that. So that's what I'm going to do. So rather than, I'll sort of try and break it down into some of those areas. So in terms of forests, so let's sort of look at deforestation as an issue. As it stands, we've lost around 80% of the world's forests already through deforestation. And when it comes to the air we breathe, the life on Earth, half of the oxygen that we breathe comes from the Earth's forests. The other half comes from the oceans. So the fact that we've destroyed 80% of, you know, the half of our life source in terms of oxygen is very concerning. Here in the UK, we've got just 2% of our ancient woodlands left. So we do very much need to protect what is left of it. So I thought we'd start with forests and some of the things that we can do to stop deforestation. So the most obvious one, although it may not seem so obvious, but is actually to eat less meat. Now, obviously, some of these overlap with the other sections. Eating less meat, for example, is one of the best things you can do to stop climate change as well. So the thing with meat eating is the forests are destroyed and cleared so that they can make space, not just for grazing cattle and livestock, but also for growing their feed, so growing corn and soya. So that is very much one of the biggest problems from eating meat. So eating less meat is a great thing that you can do. Avoiding palm oil is another thing that you can do. So you would have probably, I'm imagining, heard about palm oil and the forests, especially around Indonesia, that are being cleared to grow palm oil. Now, eating sustainably sourced palm oil is much better than not eating sustainably sourced palm oil, but if you can avoid it, then that's recommended. And then here's a simple one for everybody: making sure that your toilet roll is recycled. You would not believe the amount of pristine virgin forests around the world that are still being cut down to make toilet paper so we can wipe our bottoms. So that is a really, really good, powerful, simple thing that you can do. Make sure your toilet paper is recycled. Okay, so those are 3 things that we can do to help stop deforestation. So moving on now to climate breakdown. So in 2012, the IPCC report came out and it told us that we had 12 years to avoid irreversible ecological collapse from climate breakdown. So they said we need to stay under a 1.5 degree rise by the end of the century, and then we had 12 years to do that, to get on track. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like we're going to hit that target. The Climate Change Committee just last week announced or sent a report to the government saying that they should prepare for a 2 degrees rise, and actually they should consider a 4 degrees rise. Now, actually, that's quite terrifying. The impact of even a 1.5 degree rise was already, they were already saying that was going to be with catastrophic effects. So we really need to be acting very quickly, and our governments need to be taking this very, very seriously. What we can do on an individual level is to show our support for that, and to also show demand for things like green energy, less meat diets, ethical pensions, flying less. So just to sort of recap those things, the most powerful things we can do as an individual to reduce our carbon footprint is to fly less, a lot less. I'm not going to say don't fly. There are obviously occasions in life where you will need to fly, but you know, business flights, toing and froing, having a second home in another country and just toing and froing all the time, those are the kind of things that we really, really need to rein in. Switching to green energy, it is actually just as affordable as regular non-green energy now, especially if you switch to someone like Octopus. They are probably the greenest of the non-like uber green, like Ecotricity and Good Energy, but they are a little bit more expensive, but you get what you pay for. But Octopus is very much on a good price point if you're on a budget. So it's making sure you're flying less, you've switched to green energy. And if you have a pension, even a workplace pension, then just check where that money is invested, and if it is an ethical pension. It's actually a very, very powerful thing to divest our money from investing in fossil fuels and mining and things that are destroying the planet, and making sure that our pension fund is invested in planet positive funds. So that's something that you can do for that as well. Okay, so that is deforestation, climate breakdown. We are going to move on now to our oceans. Now, we've spoken, I've spoken quite a lot about plastic pollution already, but there's a lot more going on in the oceans that are negatively affecting them than just plastic pollution. So we are seeing overfishing, destroying entire ecosystems. We're seeing ocean acidification through the climate heating up and increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The sea acts like a sponge for that excess CO2 in the atmosphere. And it's about, like, I can sort of explain it like if you were drinking like 8 to 10 cups of coffee a day, like 1 cup would probably make you feel quite perky and it's all part of the day. But 8 to 10 cups, your body starts to become very acidic and not very healthy. And that's what's going on in the oceans at the moment. The acidity level is rising, and that's causing coral bleaching, and the temperatures are rising as well. So that's a major stress for the ocean. And also pollution from the intensive farming that we're seeing around the world, and especially from the meat and dairy industry. So sewage and fertilizers are flowing from our rivers out into the sea, and they're over nutrifying the water. So when they come out of the estuaries into the sea, it's all of these nutrients from the sewage and from the fertilizers, and it's too much. And that actually causes die-off in those areas. So we're seeing these huge dead zones appearing as well around the world. So yes, there's a lot going on with the oceans. And as I said earlier, they are responsible for every second breath we take. So again, that is something that our governments and we need to be taking seriously. So what can we do other than using less plastic and making sure we're not flushing plastic down the loo? You could also experiment with eating less fish. And maybe trying things like fish-free February, and making sure that if you are eating fish, it's really local and it's sustainably caught. And if you're only eating it sort of maybe once a month, twice a month, then really making sure that it's of a better quality. So those are some of the things that I would recommend doing. And again, as I say, they all kind of overlap. So by eating less meat, you're supporting the oceans. By flying less, you're supporting the oceans. And so it all ties together. because it's all connected. Soil. Now, soil is something that doesn't get spoken about very often. We'll finish with this one, and I probably shouldn't leave soil till last, because soil always gets left till last if it gets spoken about at all. But our soil, we've lost, in the last 150 years, we've lost half of the Earth's topsoil. And topsoil doesn't come back very quickly at all. So again, through our intensive farming methods, where we've churned up the soil, we've ploughed it, and it gets blown up into the air, or it gets washed away because we've deforested that area. And it takes something like 100 years for like a centimetre of topsoil to come back. So some studies have shown that we've got 60 years of harvest left. But if we switch to organic, then we can actually help support building the soil, because organic farming focuses on building the soil rather than destroying it. So that's one thing that we can do to protect the soil. Another thing that we can do is to use so microfibers are a way that we are polluting our soils with plastic pollution as well. So actually, when we wash our clothes, apparently it's around 11,000 pieces of microfibers that get out through our washing machines out into the sewer system. So washing your clothes less often on a lower temperature and buying more natural fibers is a way that we can reduce microfibers that are ending up on our soil as well as in our oceans. So yeah, protecting the soil, basically buying organic is probably the best way that we can protect our soil. And also, if you do want to offset your overall carbon footprint, then investing something, just a small amount every month, even like £4 a month, in reforestation projects, rewilding projects, projects that are rebuilding the soil and rebuilding trees, especially tropical trees that can grow very quickly. They can sequester carbon a lot faster than, say, ancient woodlands in the UK can. So that's rather a lot of things. I hope that's helpful. Generally, at this point, I say, to people that I meet and talk to, that to take heart and don't despair. There is still a very small window of time for us to change, and I think we are starting to see some of those changes. But where it's most exciting is on a local level, and localization is very much the way forward. And I'm sure that through the pandemic, and we've seen how communities have come together and supported each other, and that is what we need to be building on. Sharing your skills, sharing your seeds, looking after each other, building more resilience in our communities is something that we're very much gonna want to build on. So yeah, so I think I'll leave it there and it's Becky.
Cool. It's just so interesting and so inspiring, everything that you've done, and it does give us hope and makes us feel like something can happen. But isn't it interesting? There's just been so much fear around COVID-19, where it does feel to me as if we have gone slightly backwards. Not being able to use reusable coffee cups, and then finding on the beach the COVID masks, because even if you haven't got COVID, we have this idea that the masks are now contaminated with our potentially lethal breath. And so I think that, these things are then, what do you do with them? Do you put them in the recycling? Hell no. Do you put them in the bin, or are they ending up going down the toilet? So what really have you found in terms of the disposable masks and the plastic around those?
Well, we're just sort of seeing its impacts, really. There are divers in the Mediterranean who are hauling out vast numbers of sort of COVID waste. So the plastic gloves and the masks, even bottles of hand sanitizer. So that stuff is already making its way into the ocean, into the Mediterranean. I mean, the thing is it's seen as contaminated waste, so it can't be recycled. And really, it sort of just should go in your bin. But if it's obviously being used in hospitals, then that's being treated as contaminated waste. The thing is obviously most of these masks are made of plastic, and so really, the advice that we can give, if you're not working in a sort of dangerous situation like working in a hospital or a nursing home, then we're generally saying, and scientists are generally saying, that it's safe to use a reusable mask which you can just wash at home. So investing and making your own reusable mask is something that most people can do. But I would also say, like, I just think this is a blip. I don't think this is going to undo the amazing work that's happened from grassroots level up over the last 5 to 10 years. The passion and the drive and the public will is still very strong. And I don't think, the plastic industry are like, yeah, they're having their last hurrah right now, but it's not gonna stay. It can't. People are wising up to the severity and the urgency of the situation. So I think, yeah, it's a blip. It's not good, but we'll deal with it and we'll come back stronger.
I think it's just, it happened in so much of a panic. It doesn't feel like things could have been thought through for businesses. So businesses weren't able to think through, right, so we can't use disposable cups, so what can we do? So it just is taking time for everybody to suddenly go, right, what is a safe way to be able to handle this? So you're right, I think it is a bit of a blip. I don't think it's gonna have a long-term kind of impact. So you came up with some really excellent points there of what people could do. What really happens with our recycling? Because there seems to be this idea that, oh, it's okay because it says on the side of the thing I can recycle this. What actually really goes on with our recycling? Is it that things get recycled and it's just this wonderful, beautiful thing, or is it just don't create it in the first place?
Well, that would be a really great question to ask your waste. I don't know who takes your waste away in Weston, if it's Bristol Waste or if it's another waste contractor.
It's North Somerset Council, and I mean we have sort of talked about these things because on the seafront you've got these huge disposable bins, and the problem is like sometimes they're locked if they're domestic bins and sometimes they're open, but the recyclable waste on the seafront gets contaminated with non-recyclable stuff. So then how much of that actually ends up in landfill and how much of that is recycled? But within our own kind of like recycling boxes and things like that, is it really, the rule of thumb is try not to buy it in the first place? Is that what we're really looking for?
Yeah, very much so, because with recycling, we can all generally feel good that it's being turned into something else. But the thing is we export currently, I think it's around 90% of our plastics for recycling in other countries, and a lot of the time there's no accountability to what actually happens to that plastic once it's left British shores. So it's, as we saw on Hugh and Anita's war on plastic, it's ending up in Malaysia, it's ending up in Turkey, it's ending up in countries where they don't have the proper recycling facilities, and people are often, well, nearly always in marginalised communities, are being paid terrible wages, working in awful working conditions, picking through our waste, trying to find the more valuable plastic, and then the rest of it just gets incinerated and creates toxic fumes and causes illness. So it's really dark, it's really
depressing.
I'm just going to go right there with it. At the top of the chain, sort of where plastic's created in the first place, that again is affecting marginalised communities. It's generally extracted and processed in dirty chemical plants, fracking as well. And again, it's usually marginalised communities that are living, they're called sort of fence line communities. They're living right close to those factories and they're getting sick. So plastic is a dirty product from start to finish. And so, yes, if we can use less of it and choose to refuse and reuse and refill before we recycle, that's the ultimate thing. So, and it is slowly going to be getting easier. There are new things coming all the time. There's a new scheme called Loop coming to supermarkets as of October, where you can refill things like yogurt and Haagen-Dazs and hummus and things like that. So we will be seeing more refill as we go forward.
Oh, that's really exciting. And do you feel that supermarkets are really getting behind this? So some of the big brand supermarkets are actually starting to kind of like look at, okay, ish.
Yeah, yes and no. Some are definitely providing more loose fruit and vegetables. So Morrison's definitely kind of top the charts in terms of providing loose fruit and veg. Iceland have got some fantastic commitments, but yeah, it's sort of the time that it takes for those to sort of to actually happen. And then in the sort of higher end supermarkets, we're starting to see the unpackaged section and the loose sort of refill sections.
So Loop that you mentioned, is that a supermarket or what is that?
So it's a scheme that's working with supermarkets and with shops. So they will basically, they'll enable, if you're doing click and collect, or like, so sorry, not click and collect, if you're doing what's it called, home deliveries,
Yeah.
They will deliver your things in reusable containers, and you just rinse them out, and then when your stuff gets collected, they get taken away again.
And that also, most of us now have got kind of used to that shopping from home thing, or lots of people who've been shielding have been doing the shopping from home thing. So maybe this is also another thing that's kind of changing in the world, is how we actually shop too, which might give us more advantage to be able to have those things refilled, which is great. Certainly when I was living in San Francisco, I could go, I'm the queen of takeout, I could go with all of my takeout dishes to my favourite restaurant and they would just refill them. Helps the fact that I always eat the same thing, but you know, and we've started to see quite a lot of great places in Weston starting to get rid of plastic. We have of course the cleaner coastlines. We won our Surfers Against Sewage plastic free town award. They were not plastic free but less plastic award, which we have great, so the Cleaner Coastlines team are absolutely exceptional at being able to look after that. We've got Friends of Grove Park who are looking forward to permaculture and looking after the soil and the things that they're doing within our parks, so that's a really brilliant thing. Adopt a Street, looking after what's going on in the street so that you can go out and clean your own area, go out with your pincery things. And then of course all of the beach cleaning that we do, and we've started to do beach cleaning around the people who are leaving their picnics behind. So we're kind of like, hello, picking up litter, kind of, so that they can see that the people care about the town, and hopefully that rubs off without us going over to them and being aggressive and going, take your litter home with you, or creating posters that call people a T word, you know, that are starting to sort of spring up. Any other advice that you want to leave us with as an individual for things that we can sort of feel empowered to be able to do? Because I think with a lot of this, there is this anxiety around, we're all going to hell in a handbag, the climate is, you know, the climate change, the COVID, all of this stuff can feel overwhelming, which is why we've wanted to keep it positive, which you've been excellent at. So what other kinds of things do you think, just to kind of give people just before we go, that you can think of that would be great?
I mean, I just think maybe grow your own veg, build a little wildlife pond in your garden. Like I created during lockdown, I made I called it like a wildlife motel. I had an old sink, so it was just literally like a scalloped sink, and I put a load of stones in it, shoved it in the corner of my garden, loads of sticks and wood underneath the stones, so like habitat and hideout for bugs and frogs. 6 weeks later, well, I'm blowed, there's a massive frog hanging out in my little wildlife pond. So I just think, you know, what they say, create it and they will come. So, you know, grow your veg, create space for wildlife, for bees. You know, we need to look after our bees and our pollinators. And yeah, just create a little space in your heart and in your home, if you can, for something a little bit wild.
And I have to say, my little wildlife pond that I made the summer before, so this time last year, I made this wildlife pond. My goodness. I mean, I've got frog spawn that is kind of going into getting little arms and legs now, and I've got a frog in there, and all of that has kind of come up, and dragonflies in my garden. Like, how they find it, I'll never know. But yeah, it's been a real, from working from home, there's nowhere to go for your lunch break. There's nowhere to go to kind of get some air. You go out, sit down by the pond, just watch the wildlife, just get excited about all of the frog spawn growing and all of these different things happening. It is really good for your mental well-being, as well as it being really good for the world. So yeah, if you're lucky enough to be able to have a garden space, highly recommend getting a pond. Absolutely, doing something like that.
And I think that's it as well, just like trying to hold on to what aspects of the slowing down that the pandemic brought upon us, holding on to the aspects of that meant something to you and that were dear to you, like that, just being able to spend more time in your garden, or just being able to not be rushing around all the time. If you can keep working from home, has a huge impact on the environment in terms of not traveling and commuting. So yeah,
and we saw many beautiful things with COVID, whales in places where they weren't before, the cleaner water, being able to see less chemtrails in the sky. So yeah, so it we were hoping that that's going to be the thing that starts to, it's almost like it gave it breathing space, but there's still so much more to do. Natalie Fee, you are a star and a hero, and it was really, really good to talk to you. And thank you so much for joining us on our very first of these. So if you like what we're doing, please leave a comment. Let us know that that this is something that you're interested in. We will carry on bringing more speakers out. So, if you've got any requests of people, obviously it might be a little tricky for me to get Greta Thunberg, but you never know. So leave any requests in the. To be honest, I think you're way ahead of it, actually, Natalie. But that's fine. You're local, so that's fine. But anyone that you would talk to, and subjects you want us to discuss as well, so things that you want to learn, then we would really like to be guided by you. So do please let us know in the comments. And thank you again for joining us, and thank you again to Natalie Fee.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
There's
the book. Please buy a copy and tell me what you think.
Excellent. Thank you, Natalie. Bye. Bye.
Bye.